Today is Thursday. It's May 1st. And on Thursday, May 1st, we always celebrate Math Tuesday.
Math Tuesday.
It's Math Tuesday. Here on Texas Football Today, where we dive inside the numbers of Texas high school football to give you a better grasp of what's going on within our favorite sport. And today we're going to talk about experience. We're going to talk about how much it matters. I think that there's kind of reasons to believe that experience is underrated and reasons to believe that experience is overrated. And I'll give you an example. I think the Ganado Indians last year were a perfect example of experience being properly rated or perhaps even underrated. That was a team that went to the state semifinal a year ago, or in 2023, and all of us around here said, wow, that's super impressive because they did it with so many youngsters, so many guys who were underclassmen that were going to be coming back for the 2024 season, which is why they started the year as the number one team and why they won the state championship, for example. The other thing, the other way to think about it is that I think that you can never really project those breakout stars, those players who are going to be sophomores or juniors, or maybe even first year varsity players as seniors, first year starters as seniors, that are going to be able to take your team to the next level. And so as a result, I think your mileage may vary on what you think about experience. All that is to say, one of the things that we do as part of our preparation for the 2025 summer edition of Dave Campbell's Texas Football, become a Dave Campbell's Texas Football subscriber, is that we gather a questionnaire from every high school coach in the state. And we ask them a lot of the nitty-gritty information. How many lettermen do you have coming back? What's your defensive formation? Like, how many yards did your quarterback throw for last year? Things like that. A lot of nitty-gritty information. We like to follow up with a lot of them to get kind of the color in the lines. But one of the things we ask about is returning starters and what they have back. Now, a caveat on that before we dive into this. I think in my experience, Texas high school football coaches have differing and varying opinions on what constitutes a returning starter. Vianney Moreno, I'll ask you a question.
Okay.
Because you're a Dallas Cowboys fan, right?
Okay.
Dak Prescott. Would he count as a returning starter for the Dallas Cowboys next year?
A returning starter, yes.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Cooper Rush, would he count as a returning starter?
No.
Even though I think he started more games than Dak.
He's not even with us anymore.
Okay, that's not the point. What I'm saying is that there's not a hard and fast rule on what constitutes a returning starter. Maybe you started 6 of your 11 games, and so you say, well, you're a returning starter, right?
That makes sense.
Or there are other coaches who say, if you started 1 game, then you're a returning starter. There are also players who they cycle guys in that may not have been starters, that they may be counting as returning starters, so to speak. So a grain of salt on all this, because this is self-reported. But I want to show you the teams with the most returning starters heading into 2025. And so we'll throw up the first graphic here. And this is going to be a list of some teams that maybe you didn't expect or maybe you did. So I think these kind of fall into a couple of categories. One category is extremely young varsity programs. And what I mean by that are programs like Eagle Mountain, who played a first-year varsity season last year, Lubbock Liberty, Fort Bend Crawford, right? These are programs, Katy Harmony, they were first-year varsity programs, New Caney West Fork. Those are programs that we expected because they played with basically all juniors, or they played with all underclassmen, right? We expected them to have a lot of returning starters. There's other teams here that I think are rather interesting. Cedar Hill TLC. Cedar Hill TLC actually finished with a 1-10 record, but they had a bunch of forfeits in there too. They were better than that record indicates. They bring back all 11 offensive starters. You've also got programs like Gladewater. Gladewater brings back every defensive starter. Canyon Lake brings back every defensive starter. Whitesboro brings back every offensive starter. And so it's a bit of a mixed bag here as far as the profile of these programs that bring back all of their starters within one unit, okay? But this may not necessarily mean a hill of beans, because here's what I mean by that. How many of these teams were actually good? And so what I did, I took the same graphic, and all I'm going to do is sort out the teams that have a winning record coming out of last year. And there's three of them. Whitesboro has all 11 offensive returning starters from a team that went 6-5 a year ago. Canyon Lake has all 11 defensive starters coming back from a team that went 8-4. And then the one that I want to flag for you here is Bremond. Bremond brings back all 11 defensive starters coming off of a run to the state semifinals, a 12-3 record. We're going to talk a little bit more about Bremond, but that's one that keeps my eye. The rest of these teams that bring back all of their offensive starters are bringing back were under 500 last year. They did not have a winning record. And so, again, it's one of those things that your mileage may vary. Does having all of the starters back from a team that struggled, is that better or worse than bringing back maybe like half of your starters from a team that was really good, right? I think there's different ways to measure that. But I want to take a look at one other thing. And because I think around here, we've said this before, if you win 10 games in the season, you had a good year. Would you say that's fair, VNA? Mm-hmm. That if Lake Dallas won 10 games, you would say, great year, Lake Dallas.
Yeah.
That's kind of the for me, like a decent threshold. If you get to double-digit wins, there's no debate. You had a good year.
Yeah.
Maybe it matters for your expectation level in your community or whatever, but it's a good year and you should celebrate it. And so what I wanted to do is I want to filter down only teams that won 10 or more games in 2025 and look at which teams have the most returning starters from that group. And these are teams that I would say you need to keep an eye on heading into 2025. So let's roll that beautiful bean footage. And here are the teams that bring back the most offensive starters from 10-win teams. On the offensive side, there's 3 teams that bring back 10 offensive starters. Canyon West Plains, which was a play away from essentially playing in a state championship. PSJA North, down there in the Rio Grande Valley, and South Lake Carroll. They bring back they bring 10 of their 11 offensive starters. And then you've got a sextuplet of teams that have 9 offensive starters coming back. Brenham was very young. I called one of their games on FanDuel Sports Southwest this past year. They were extremely young. They bring back a ton of playmakers. Pleasant Grove brings back 9 offensive starters. We knew they were young last year, and that's showing up. Sealy is bringing back 9 offensive starters after a breakout season. Tidehaven, keep an eye on the Tigers. They're in 3A Division II, especially with the uproar at the top of the classification. Tidehaven is a team that brings back 9 offensive starters. Windthorst brings back 9 offensive starters as well. It's a team with state championship pedigree. And Wink was very young last year, and they are coming back in a big, big way with 9 offensive starters. On the defensive side, we already mentioned Bremond. They're the only team with coming off of a 10-win season that brings back their entire unit with their offensive defense. There's 3 other teams with 10 defensive starters coming back. Shelbyville, the Dragons, coming back. Stephenville brings back 10 defensive starters, and Tyler Chapel Hill. And then there's 4 teams that bring back 9 defensive starters. Hitchcock brings back 9 defensive starters, very young defensively last year. San Antonio Johnson brings back 9 defensive starters. Sulphur Springs out there in East Texas brings back 9 defensive starters. And there's one other team. It's South Lake Carroll. South Lake Carroll brings back 9 defensive starters. In fact, if you were to take a look at the 10-win teams across the state of Texas and the teams that bring back the most number of returning starters combined total, you've got 2 teams that bring back 19 total starters. One is Bremond. They've got 8 starters coming back on the offensive side. And the other is the only team to appear on both sides of this graphic. And that's South Lake Carroll. A team that, you remember, went 15-1. A team that played in a state championship a year ago and is now bringing back 19 starters from that team. Brenham, Canyon West Plains, PSJA North, Sealy, Shelbyville, Pleasant Grove, Tidehaven, Windthorst, bringing back 17 starters. But as far as returning experience from teams that played very deep, Bremond and South Lake Carroll are the 2 teams that you should have circled, because if experience matters, then the Tigers and the Dragons have it in spades. So It's a look at the most experienced Texas high school football teams heading into the 2025 Texas high school football season. Of course, we're crunching all these numbers to put together the 2025 summer edition of Dave Campbell's Texas Football, which you can get by becoming a Dave Campbell's Texas Football subscriber. Go to texasfootball.com/subscribe, become a Dave Campbell's Texas Football subscriber, get the 2025 summer edition mailed to you. It'll end up on your doorstep. Plus, tonight, you can watch playoff baseball and playoff softball on Dave Campbell's Texan Live. Right? It's tonight.
Yes.
Dave Campbell's Texan Live. You watch it tonight. You don't got to wait for a magazine to get value for your subscription. You get it tonight. It also makes a great gift, and Mother's Day is coming up. Get your mother the gift of football. TexasFootball.com/subscribe. Would your mother like a subscription to Dave Campbell's Texas Football? Like if you got it for her?
Yeah, she'd
See?
appreciate it.
That's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Show your mother you love her. TexasFootball.com/subscribe.